Howdy, folks. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We got a fun show today. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to look at a lot of projects. We're going to be a little bit rapid fire, but that's okay. Welcome. I don't think we actually have too many announcements of any kind, so we are just, I think, going to dive into our guest, who is a very talented artist, great developer on the touch designer scene. Relatively a new face of the touch designer scene, but making a lot of waves both at the championship, which we're going to talk about today, as well as just getting into that work scene. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest here, Aristotle Roufanis. Let me move over to our little layout here. How's it going, my friend?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Albert. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Things are good.
Things are good. Well, I like to hope things are good. We're going to dive into some of those good things very shortly. And for folks that don't really know much about you, or maybe this is the first or second or third time they're seeing you, do you want to tell them a little bit about yourself and your company?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a visual artist, an engineer, and a creative software developer based in Athens, Greece, mostly. Yeah, I joined the touch designer community, I guess, the past 3 years, is it now? Yeah, it was intimidating at first, as for everyone. But yeah, things ramped up a bit, and now I'm happy to say that, you know, it's providing me with most of my work income at this point in life. So
that's amazing. Congrats.
Yeah, it surpassed my artistic income at this point. So I've been focusing more and more on it. So yeah, I've been working less on graphics and more on system development this past year or two. And yeah, I find a lot of interest inside of it.
It's interesting, and I think that could be a fun topic that we can come back to close to the end of it, because I feel like you in particular, you know, coming from that, I mean, we can even talk about it now. I mean, coming from for folks that don't know, Aristotle comes from a real photography background, kind of like a fine art background, and even kind of managing large construction projects. So you've kind of done a lot of different kinds of work. And one of the things that was interesting was, you know, when we were talking before, you are, because I think for a lot of artists, right, they want to make art, and then when it gets to doing things that are more technical, it actually becomes things that they don't like doing technical things, or it's boring, or it's not as fulfilling as the art. But I think something that's interesting that you were kind of mentioning to me was you do actually enjoy that kind of system development, tool building, kind of just, you know, for lack of a better term, just raw touch designer programming as opposed to pure art making. But you did also mention that it's a little bit different, and balance, you know, in the future is one of the goals that kind of you're targeting. Is that kind of in line with what you're thinking?
Absolutely, yes. And you know, I've fought hard to reach a point in my creative practice, you know, where I could get things shown properly and work with museums and large galleries. So the fact that I've lost contact for the past year or so with COVID and everything, it really hurts me, you know, and I want to get back on the scene. But at the same time, I've been enjoying programming deeply, and I think it is truly an art form in itself. So not in the sense that you have to create really complex stuff, but creating things that are usable and you know, that are transformable and adaptable, and I think that's where the art form lies. So I've been really enjoying all the challenges that I've had with this.
And I think it's a really good attitude, because I feel like it's similar to what I experienced like earlier on in my career, where I think you know, I came into the touch designer space from a music perspective and really wanting to essentially make visuals for my music, and then just like you were saying, I was like, oh, wait a second, I can like pay my bills if I put that on pause and do other work. And I just really learned to love like the challenges of development. And to your point, like, you know, and I think this is maybe, if I was gonna, you know, my tip of the day for folks is, if you learn to find things you enjoy in all the work you do, it definitely makes work a lot easier to do for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. So I think it's like a great kind of perspective that you have there.
And also,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, another thing that we've discussed in person in the past as well is that when building systems, instead of building creating artwork, your goal is for it to function. Basically, there is some subjectivity involved, but at the end of the day, this thing has to function properly. So as long as it does, your client is happy and they pay you. Whereas with professions that have the subjective viewpoint on them, that's not always the case. So you may have fought really hard to create something beautiful, and your client might not like it. So it's very refreshing as well to work in something that's as binary as code.
I think that's one of my favorite things about, when I transitioned kind of away from the artistic side of things and kind of really committed myself to the technical. I was like, man, this is really great. If I make a bullet point checklist of all the things I have to do, if I do them and check them off, the project is finished. And then, like you're saying, then you get paid, which is really nice. So I will say now, welcome everybody from the chat. I see all our good friends here. I see Luke. We see Blessings from the Bronx. Guten Morgen from Portland, Oregon. Anamika saying it's intimidating being a newbie on the platform. I can certainly agree, and I think that's why. Yes, and I think you see that from a lot of kind of folks who've been in the community for a long time. I think they can also relate to that, which is why there's such a sharing aspect of our community, because everybody remembers the pain of, oh my god. I mean, even sometimes I open Touch Designer, I'm like, oh, I don't even remember the simplest. It really grinds the gears. So, welcome everybody in chat, and we are going to be diving into looking at some really cool projects that Aristotle has put together, and Aristotle's going to share some tricks with us. So what I want to see is all the folks in the chat start getting your questions ready. This is as much a conversation between me and Aristotle as it is between us and all you folks watching. So with that said, there's two other kind of questions I wanted to ask before we dived into the project side of things. And actually, I got to fix something on the stream because. Okay, so for folks that don't know, because before the stream started, me and Aristotle were talking, and I'm very excited that I have an RTX card now. It's like the biggest, it's like my biggest achievement in my career. It's like, oh my god, I have a new graphics card. This is so much fun. So I tried to use the RTX
Perfect.
this thing, the background removal everywhere. But then we decided it looks weird that my background's removed, so that's why I moved everything down. So this is just, I'm telling you, this is the real talk right now. I'm just gonna move everything back to where it was. I thought I was trying to be clever, and it wasn't clever. So just give me 10 seconds here, because otherwise it looks weird. The bottom half of the screen has no video, but the top half of the screen has content. Okay, this is it was triggering me, and I'm not even an artist. I'll say. Okay, we actually
for everyone watching. If you guys can, show appreciation on Elbrus having an RTX card, that'd be great.
Okay, listen, we don't have to make a whole situation. I'm just trying to express how excited I am for. I haven't bought a new computer for years. This is an exciting moment for me. So actually, we do have a good question for you, Aristotle. This is actually from Twidget X13, and actually, I asked him the same question right before we got on the stream. He said, "What do you use to shape your beard? It's majestic."
Really?
Do you just do clippers, or do you use a razor? What's your situation? Yeah, no, it looks real good.
No, I use a regular, the trimmer that the barbershop has, and I just
the big one that you would do on a head.
Yeah, and I go zzz, zzz.
So you line it up. You line it up yourself.
No, these are razor bits.
Okay. So you razor these bits and then you trim to clean it.
Yeah.
We could have a master class on the beard. No, don't worry. We're gonna do another live stream. Twidget's given me an idea. We're just gonna do a beard live stream later, where we just do a set. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
So I digress. Let's get back onto some serious situations. What have you been working on lately? I know you've been working on a couple projects and some interesting things.
Yeah. So funnily enough, for the past more than a year, actually, I've been working on projects from telecommunications companies in the US, mostly. So again, for system building, I've been blessed to have been working with some, crazy talented people. So I've learned a lot along the way. That I've been working for a lighting company in the UK as well. Some creative studios in Greece. I'm really bad in showcasing all this stuff, but yeah, I've been lucky to be busy enough, so I didn't have time to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been pretty good. And at the same time, along with a very good friend and colleague, we're starting out a space now, a workshop where the goal is within the next year to be able to create our own hardware installations and sculptures.
Oh, great. So that's like
So
kind of a little bit of fabrication, like 3D printers and things like this. Is that what you're thinking?
3D printing, laser cutting, the
Mm.
CNC, robot arms, all this crazy stuff. So
Oh, epic.
my friend is a robotics and electronics engineer, so we'll join forces and hopefully create something nice out of it.
That
But
sounds
the
awesome.
idea
That's
is also to
exciting.
create an educational space as well for people who are getting into the industry, or for people who want to learn more about the industry, because things in Greece aren't as, the interactive and creative spectrum is not as popular, let's say, as it is in the US, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or Canada even more. So yeah, the idea is to hopefully give back something to the community.
Mm-hmm. I think that'd be really interesting because, what I find so interesting about the European community, European scene, is that it feels like there are lots of pockets, and all the pockets are really close together, but still separate enough where, like, to your point, you could say, Greece doesn't have that big of a scene, doesn't really have that much of a, dedicated community. But then, I think about a lot of the folks who live just nearby in Italy, and Italy seems to have like a relatively large size scene. Like I feel like it's Italy, Amsterdam, Paris, Germany, Berlin, like these kind of places are a little bit of the hot spots. So I think that'd be awesome to have a little bit of an educational space in there and kind of help build up that community, because I don't see why not. I mean, the
Absolutely.
birthplace of live performance. Am I right? Is that? I feel like that's
Yeah,
something
pretty much.
my theater friend would tell me.
And if we get you to come and teach people, that'd be even better.
Oh, I'll for you get me a hero and I'm there, bro. That's it doesn't take a lot of pay to get me anywhere these days. So
We
one
have
thing I
your
actually wanted
RTX
to,
cards and everything.
yeah, we got RTX cards. I'm there. You got RTX cards. I'm coming over. So one thing that I think was interesting, and this is the last question I swear for the chat. If you're all like, I know you're craving to see some of that touch designer notch goodness. Don't worry, we're getting there.
Absolutely.
One thing I think would be interesting just to kind of quickly ask was, because you are one of the, I think, few people from the championship that actually participated in both of them, so this year's and last year's. How was that experience for you? Did it have kind of any impact on your day-to-day life or your career in any sense? Was it fun? Because I mean, it must have been okay if you came back for the second one.
Absolutely. Well, it was a big time investment both times. Practicing was a big part of it, especially last year, the previous one. I was in a very different place in terms of my skills, so it forced me to learn a lot and in a diverse and quick manner. This year, before the championship, I had been focusing on electronics a lot, so I hadn't been working in touch for a month or so. So I jumped right back at it, and yeah, it was great. It meant I didn't do summer holidays though this time.
Those are still a thing? Can I sign up for one of
those are
those?
still a thing. My family had them,
Yeah.
and I didn't. But both times it created great career opportunities for me. So I think I very much owe the fact that I'm now working almost 100% as a touchdown developer to the championships, because for someone like me who doesn't have a 10-year CV, full of creative coding experience, these were proof enough, that I'm competent on it. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, actually.
I mean, hey, it's our pleasure. To hear that means it was worth it for us to, because while you guys missed summer vacation getting yourselves prepared, we missed summer vacation getting the event ready. And I know like so many folks on the team who were working on it. I mean, they were like double book, triple book with like. I almost felt bad because our championship was so small compared to everything else that the team was working on. Like, world championships of this kind of esports, international deployment of this project. And I'm like, hey guys, don't forget we have the championship on Saturday, please. And everybody came through it, and really I'll support all those guys forever. But so I think now would be a great time to dive into some of the projects you made for some of the challenges, talking about some tricks you used. And I think the first question, as we're diving in, is kind of how did you approach your tool choices in terms of, because I know you use a lot of Touch Designer, a lot of Notch, but I also know like behind the scenes, you're learning Unreal and getting into that, and you're really great about, I know you cables, like you're really great about touching all the tools, getting to know them a little bit, finding out where they might be stronger or weaker, and then finding ways to combine them. I mean, is that something that you purposefully think about coming into something like the championship, or even a project, even if for folks at home comparing like the championship to a project, I think is pretty relevant?
Absolutely. Yes, every tool has its purpose, and there's no one size fits all, in this industry, I guess. Touch Designer is a given, not only because this was a Touch Designer championship, but also, because it's crazy useful as a foundation platform for anything you want to throw on top of it. Then I used Notch as the integration bit, because I have other than Touch Designer, it's the piece of software that I have most experience on. And it's very quick to get really good results with it. Perhaps less impressive than what you can achieve with Unreal. But for the type of thing I'm going to show you, it was something I felt confident that I could put together in the time provided. So it was a one-way street, let's say, for me. I had to really choose this.
I think that's one of the really kind of like impressive parts about everyone's performance in the championship is really, how do we get the best result in the smallest amount of time possible? And I think that's kind of really similar to how a real life project works. Like most of these projects that we get and people are working on it, the client calls you and they're like, hey, we need this in like 3 weeks, and it's the most complicated state machine, like 100 video playback elements you got to integrate, a bunch of real-time stuff. So knowing how to get from 0 to impressive or finished or whatever that end goal is, I think is such an important thing for people to think about. So do we want to switch over to the screen share?
Absolutely.
And as we do that, for folks that didn't end up catching the championship, let me switch over here. If they didn't know, so this is from the integration challenge, right? No, this is the center challenge.
This is the sensor challenge. Yes, this was the first one or not?
I think the integration was first, but it doesn't matter too much. So the sensor challenge, for folks that missed it, was essentially competitors had to pick their favorite kind of input, like an interactive real-time input, whether it was audio, mouse and keyboard, Kinect, Leap Motion, really whatever kind of controller people like to use. And they just had to create something compelling with it in 90 minutes. So what we have here, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening. And first of all, I guess we should probably start with the previs, right? Because that's an element that consists throughout all of your challenges. And I think that's one of the areas where, on the one hand, it was easy for judges to see like, oh, this is like a beautiful piece, really imagine what it might look like in the space, not just like a flat texture of content. But I also think that is such an important skill in the real world now. So can you walk us through a little bit of the previs setup and your approach to thinking about that previs setup?
Absolutely. Let me stop it from moving though, because it's rather irritating at the moment. I like to think and see things in at the very least fake environment. I'm a 3D guy in terms of 3D actual stuff, tangible. So I like to present things in that context as much as possible. So that's why for all challenges I created installations, installation mockups, let's say, instead of graphics. Nothing wrong with graphics only, just not what I like to do. So yeah, I created this room. It has 3 walls basically. This doesn't work at the moment, so this is where the Twitch stream was coming through. So you had a pixel shader basically running, showing the Twitch stream. The main wall was showing myself in real time, again with the same
ASCII
shader,
kind
just
of, the
ASCII shader.
Yeah, we'll get to that. That's a fun one.
Fonts. And that's it basically. A fake ceiling type of thing, and some nice reflections. So
now, is that previs coming in from Notch, or is that coming in from Touch side of things?
There is a Twitch stream actually. Just needed to fetch a new.
Oh yeah, if you
messages.
guys, okay, so hold on, wait. If people type in chat right now, hold on, let me type in chat too. And we do have a question that says, "Will this be uploaded afterwards?" Yeah, on our YouTube channel, it saves all of the recordings. And the nice thing about the YouTube channel is it saves the live stream recordings forever. If you're more of a Twitch viewer, Twitch also does save it, but I believe it only saves them for 60 days. So if you're going to watch it soon, watch on Twitch or YouTube. If you want to know that you can always go back and watch all of our live streams, you can hit on our YouTube channel where all of them are. Okay, oh yeah, I was going to type in chat. I'm going to... there it is. There's some messages are flowing in. I will say, of all the companies, Twitch's API seems so stable. Like it, the fact that this still works the way it does is like, oh great, that's the kind of API I like. The one you just turn it on and it still does exactly the same thing it did a couple months ago.
It's brilliant. And the fun fact is that this tool that gets the Twitch chat, is based on the one you made and provided us for last year's championship. So
there you go. That's as stable as an API gets. Yeah.
Yeah. But also this was supposed to be a sensor challenge, and I thought I could use the Kinect again or something like that. But A, I hate the Kinect; it's so buggy that it freaks me out. And B, what could I do that would be something that no other contestant would do? And I thought let's use the input, the text input from the people as an external input. And I also had this had made a Telegram bot, and I had it ready.
Oh, funny!
So people from the chat could text and on my Telegram bot and control the scene. But it felt too complicated for people to understand. So I had created a process where they were getting feedback messages compared to depending on what they sent and things like that. It was way too complicated. Easy to set up, but hard for people to follow compared to something like this, which is
especially since for the championship, for folks that didn't watch, I mean, you're on screen for a few minutes, then it goes to 12, 16 other people before it comes back. And you don't really have that kind of direct, explanation capability that you would in a place like this. So before we actually get into those, I did want to take a look. So, because I believe your environment setups, are they on the Notch side of things?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you asked that again, and I forgot to reply.
No, that's okay.
No, this is all Touch Designer at the moment.
Oh, interesting. So. Do you mind walking us through kind of a little bit in the environment? Because I think people see this, immediately think, there's some reflections on the floor. It's a good looking render. This must be Notch. And it's really Absolutely. Fun to see that actually, no, this is all just this. So this example, but your other one, I think, that we're going to look at later was the Notch one.
Yes, the second one, the other one is Notch, and there's another one in Touch Designer.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
I think... good lighting goes a long way. So good lighting and shadows. So key things on this setup that would make it look nicer than your average, I guess, Touch Designer rendering process is the setting up the lights correctly, basically. So at the moment we have 3 lights, which are positioned so the panels create shadows and things have volume, let's say. So if you put a light dead in front of an object, it will lose all its shadows. So that makes it look fake, because never in real life you have a light, directly in front of an object. So in that design, we don't have area lights to create something more natural, and that's sad. But I'm trying to replicate that as best as possible with lights with a wide cone angle and cone delta. So that's this bit, and then we have.
Now hold on, before you move on to the lights, because I think that's a really interesting point. Do you find that the way you think about that lighting comes from your photography background? Like, is that
absolutely
where you got a lot of the learn? Because I feel like, even when you're explaining to me, oh, you should set up your lights properly, as someone who came from music to programming, I don't know what properly is. And I don't know if you have like an interesting like reference where if folks wanted to learn more a little bit about like lighting setups.
Yeah, I think any photography book would explain things nicely. Like the light is number one thing in photography. Photo in Greece means light. It's the way that light gets written, basically. That's the bad translation of the word, but
like graphing light, basically.
Yeah. So, like if you see on the ceiling here, you can see that this grid, we see its shadow on the fact that we see the shadow on some part and not on the others. It creates volume. It makes your mind realize that it's a 3D item. So. When they say beauty is in the shadows, it's a fact. We need the shadows to create an interesting composition. And that brings me to the other point, which is actually putting the camera in the right place, both compared to the light and framing things. So even simple stuff like the rule of thirds, or the Fibonacci spiral, or leading lines. Things like that all benefit. The same laws that apply to photography or cinematography, or for that matter, apply to creating 3D work. So I think anyone who creates this sort of work needs to at least watch a workshop or two on YouTube on how to framing and lighting objects.
I think that would probably actually be very helpful for a lot of people, because there's tons of materials like that on YouTube, online for free. On you could on Udemy or Udacity, probably $20 you get like a nice course from a real professional that teaches you like, here's how some basic lighting setups work. Here's some good rules for framing and camera angles. One thing I thought that could be interesting right now, because on the right side you have the the container viewer. If you change that right side panel to the geometry viewer, I wonder if, because it'll show us where all the lights are, and it'll show us all of the camera positions. Oh, that's interesting. So you actually have, so those cones, for people that are referencing, the 3 cones on the walls, those are the lights, right?
Yes.
And then your camera is, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
We have 2 cameras which get blended with this camera blend.
Yeah.
So we transition from one to the other. Like if we see this camera here.
But I guess it'd probably easier to see in the render that the camera is moving between each other.
Yeah. I'll show that later, I guess. But yeah, so the lights are in a way against the camera, they're not coming from the camera. So
see, that's so interesting, because that is the opposite of how I, as someone who doesn't know anything about lighting, would think to place the lights. I would say, in my mind, it's like, I would put them like right behind the camera, maybe somewhere on the same plane as the camera, pointing towards the walls. But that's really interesting, and so that is what helps really provide that sense of depth in all dimensions, is because you really do have kind of light filling the space from all these different angles.
Yes, and it also, in a way, it makes sense in this case because we have light coming out of these panels. So if this was an actual setup, like with multiple display panels, on the wall, they would emit light. So as we don't have nice emissive materials in Touch Designer, this would be a way to fake that. So another thing I've done in the past within Touch Designer was to just from the render at the top, get a what is it? Is it an info top? What's the name? Where you get the
Which
value?
one are you looking for? The info chop?
Yeah, it could work with the info chop as well, but there's just getting the brightness value of a specific area of the render.
Oh, like analyze chop.
Analyze chop, yeah, exactly. And
or analyze top, sorry, analyze top, yeah.
Analyze top, and feed that color on the light.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So like you're dynamically changing the light color.
Exactly.
Based on the content.
Yeah, and the brightness of it. So I could have this texture in the background driving this light, both in terms of brightness and in terms of color. So if that helps a lot, adding that missing realism in Touch Designer,
Well, I think it's
sure
really
there are
amazing.
fancier ways to do it, but that's how I do it.
Yeah, and I think actually looking at this view is really telling because this is what most people imagine when they think, oh, Touch Designer render. Like, there's my geometry, it's flat and kind of janky looking, but when you switch from that back to the render view, if you told me that was notch at the beginning, I'd be like, that looks like a nice notch block. It's very.
Hey, come on, it's not that nice, but thank you.
No, but it's definitely if. And it's, I always tell this to people, it's not that the Touch Designer rendering is bad, it just takes a few more steps than some of the other things. Just because, for a software to be so open and able to do everything, it means the defaults can't be set perfectly for your situation. They're just going to be set to some generic value. And, I think this example is a great one showing that, you can get like a really decent looking render, like a really nice looking render without, and this is not, you didn't write any custom shaders or anything like that. Like, there's not like the crazy out of everyone's skill level type of stuff. It feels really much like some fundamentals maybe of lighting, camera positioning, and I am curious, what technique did you use for the reflection on the floor? And actually, now that we saw the other view, I can see where the lights kind of are, like on the around the screens, which is interesting.
Also very important is the screen space ambient occlusion, which takes a while to figure out how to set up nicely, but it really adds a lot of realism on top of things. So the reflections, it's a tool I found. Let me see if there's a reference inside because I forget the name. Well, there's sadly no name here to find the guy who made this, so I'm really sorry. I promise to come back to you with that one. Perhaps you can add it in the comments. Yeah, and basically you feed the depth map. It now shows white because this is a 32-bit texture, so there is depth inside. And you create render passes of the objects you want to. No, this is for different. This is a render pass for the object we want the reflections to be on. Now, this is a ready-made tool, but you could do the same thing yourself. There are tutorials out there on how to do reflections in Touch Designer with multiple cameras.
Yeah, I think Matthew has a good blog post series about reflections and some videos, if I remember.
Basically, you create a camera that sees it's reverted on the x-axis, let's say. So it sees a flipped image, and you add that texture on the material of the object you want to be reflected. So it all makes sense if people read Matthew's blog post. It's a very neat process. Things get complicated if you want to do multiple surfaces and stuff like that. But if you only have if you only want to do a planar reflection or a simple spherical one, I think. It should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, other than that, this is a tool Dylan has made, which is great. And
oh yeah, that color curve one.
Yeah. I think it was based on something Vasily Betin created, and then Dylan made it better. So yeah, you have this like a Photoshop color curve tool. I use it all the time. It's makes my life so much easier compared to just using the level top. Yeah, and people can look into it in the derivative community posts, or what's the name?
Yeah,
of
we
the
can put
other
some links. We can put some links on the video afterwards for folks that want to check this stuff out.
So yeah, that's.
I think that covers the render area pretty well, and I think that's like super cool that this one is fully natively in Touch Designer. So going into the ASCII side of things, I think you did something really interesting that I feel like I've seen this come up a few times in the community, people asking like, oh, how do I get to this effect? How do I get to this effect? Or, posts from other communities like Open Frameworks or other similar communities like sharing work like this and people really enjoying it. So what is actually like going on in there?
Absolutely. So we have basically two components here that are the same thing actually. You just have a flip toggle that switches between text or my video feed. You could select colors, which I think are not working at the moment. Oh, they are. All right. So one is the background color and the other one is the foreground color, the text color. I think I've made them too emissive, so they lose the text color gets always to be white or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see what's going on inside. So we have the texture coming in. This actually, before we do that, yeah, let's see how the camera feed gets processed.
And I'll say for folks that are watching it, if you do have questions about what you're seeing on screen and what's going on, don't hesitate to put them in chat. We're looking at the chat. Not only in Aristotle's project, we can see the chat coming through, but I also have all the chat windows here open. So if there are some questions about how Aristotle is kind of building some of these components, put them in there. We're happy to go into it.
So yeah, over here, basically, I've just recorded this as a movie file, so I don't have to do it with the camera at the moment, but it's the same thing. We could turn this on and get the camera feed. We use the NVIDIA as a background top, which creates a matte.
RTX, I'm telling you, that's RTX. So good.
Not only Elbridge is lucky enough to have an RTX card, I'm having an old one as well.
The best part is mine's not even. What is mine? A 3060, 30. Like mine's a laptop. It's not even like that good. But I'm just like, wow, this is so cool. It's got so many features.
2080 Ti. It's boringly old now. So yeah, here we have the texture prep. Okay, let's see now here.
So essentially that area just kind of just removes the background and gives you the main area of the person.
Absolutely. And here's where the instancing happens. So
can I just say, and this is one of the most fun parts about Touch Designer for me is if you go back up a level.
Yep.
Okay, so just visually, like I see camera feed coming in, and then I see like some crazy chop channels going in. I'm expecting to go in there and find like 100 operators. And the most fun part is you go in there, and there's only like 20 operators in there that are doing this like pretty complex conversion from. I mean, I guess it's better if you to explain it than for me to guess what's going on.
So yeah, let me remember as well, because
ain't that the truth. And this is why folks, if you're ever wondering why, me and Matthew are always saying document your project, comment your code. It's because it's surprisingly amazing how quickly you forget everything about a project. I mean, Aristotle, what you say, like, for me, it's even like 1 week. If I don't look at a project for 1 week, it's like completely wiped from my. I have to relearn like
Yeah,
what
yeah,
is this? What
absolutely.
is going on here?
Especially if you've been being busy in the meantime, it's your mind can only hold so much, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but the good thing is with touch design and development in general is that the more you create tools, you don't have to remember them. If I ever need to do an ASCII shader again, I'll just go back to this one and I have it ready. So
Mm.
you create a toolbox basically, and you can make money out of it in the future as well. So that's nice. So over here we have the type textures basically. So for this
Oh,
shader,
interesting.
the background with just my face on,
Hmm.
I just use this one. So in order of brightness, let's say. So we start with nothing and we go with the character that I thought would be the filling most of the screen. So if that makes sense.
Oh, interesting. So
The,
your mapping of characters to pixels is
exactly,
based on the brightness of the original source pixel.
absolutely.
Interesting. So it's not because I
So
at first I thought I was like maybe it's random. Maybe you just have like a character set and you know
no,
characters to
it's
the wind kind of thing. But that's actually very interesting. So it's actually brightness
yeah.
based.
So if a value of brightness, from the incoming texture is close to 1,
Mm.
it will get this texture. If it's close to 0, it will get this one, and everything in between. And you can go nuts with it. You can have a ton of different characters inside. But if you have too many, then it becomes too noisy, and it's not as nice, I found.
Yeah, and I guess that then it becomes hard
So
to tell what's actually going on screen, and there's too many
absolutely, yeah.
characters and things like that.
So I thought that sticking with how many are those? 9 of them was enough. So yeah, we have those switching constantly, and they get analyzed on.
Hmm.
So this is what gives us the brightness, and so these get fed in texture 3Ds. So one for the brightness and one for the texture, the actual texture, and then we create a reference to be able to know which brightness value corresponds to which textures, basically. I don't know if that makes sense, or if I.
Is that because the original sources are not already in order? So then you need a kind of
Yeah,
reference of what the brightness order is
exactly,
because it's not linear by nature.
exactly, yes. So this is a linear pattern, and this is how it looks when it's changed depending on the brightness, basically,
Mm.
of the textures. So yeah, here we have this reference chop, basically, which creates a lookup table in essence to the texture cache.
Oh, look, there's our messages.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, we have both instancing operators happening, and we get a switch depending on what you want to choose.
Mm. And the ASCII
So
instancing
yeah,
that's the one that's used on the camera right now in the background.
exactly.
Mm.
So yeah, this is where we get the texture coming in,
And is that
and we get
basically like the all channels, shuffled in
it's
a straight
just the
line?
R,
But just
just
the
the red.
like it's because I think for a lot of folks they don't because this is using that new feature that output as single channel set
Exactly.
button. Because if you turn that
Yeah,
off, that's I think what people are used to seeing from a top to chop, which is every pixel row as a channel. And then a lot of the times we would have to put like a shuffle chop after it to do what it now can do by itself, which is super handy. So when you hit that, essentially what happens is you can imagine that every pixel row kind of gets like butted up against each other into a single. So like if it's 100 by 100, first 100 samples are the first pixel row, second 100 samples are the second pixel row, third 100 samples are third pixel row, and you have all of that like whole image worth of brightness in one channel.
exactly. So then we get this value and we do a lookup against
Mm.
the indexes of the textures. So, and this creates the number, that selects the texture out of the cache
That's coming out of the text
for
3D, right?
each pixel. Yeah, the text 3D, sorry.
Yeah.
For each pixel.
Interesting.
Yeah, this is where the coloring happens. So it's nothing fancy. This creates basically a mask for the where we have something happening or not. And
that mask, for folks that aren't used to channel mask as much, is you could almost imagine, like the same thing actually you did with the background removal, where like NVIDIA gives you like, okay, here's all the white pixels where is person, black pixels equal nothing on screen. And this channel mask thing is really useful. Like, I use this a ton as well, where essentially 1 equals something on screen. It's like the equivalent of a white pixel from one of those masks. And then 0 equals nothing on screen. And then what you can do is multiply that against kind of all of this incoming data, which essentially just gives, it's almost like, multiplying a black and white alpha matte against, your color image or something like that.
So that's what's happening here. So we have 2 colors, one for the background and one for the ASCII type. So what I'm doing is for the secondary color, I'm flipping it. So and I'm multiplying it with that color. So where it's outside of the mask, it gets a secondary color. Where it's inside of the mask, it gets a primary color.
Yeah, so it's almost like you have the regular mask and the inverted mask.
Exactly. And then you add them together, and you get the color values for all the pixels, basically.
And that just feeds into like just a regular old instancing setup, right?
Exactly, yes. And you just merge it with the text3D data, and out it comes, basically.
Could you zoom in on the right side into the actual, or is there a way to see the ASCII? Because I think it's a little bit hard for people to probably see the characters in action, and I think it's so fun just to see the actual, like to actually look at it closely for a second, see all the different characters, and how bright parts of your face get those higher brightness value pixels, and dark parts around like your shirt get those lower pixel value characters like the dots and the things like that. That's really cool. I like that. I think this is a super cool example because it really shows, I think, the power of instancing. Because I feel like a lot of the time people, when they start Touch Designer, they're like, okay, cool, like I can do like all this stuff inside a Touch Designer, amazing. Then they hit like this intermediate wall where operators start to get hard. Like operators start to get very specific in what they do. Like shuffle chop, I think that's part. When you hit shuffle chop, you're like at that level, and you're thinking, wow, this chop is like really confusing. I have like no idea what it does or why it does it. And I find the danger for a lot of people is that they hit that wall, then they see really experienced professionals who are saying like, oh yeah, I use GLSL a lot. And then I think for a lot of people, what happens is they think, oh, well, this is Touch Designer's like limit of just using some operators and stuff inside of Touch. I have to basically become like a GLSL person to do like these crazy cool effects. I think something like this really shows like it's. I mean, this is less than what, like 50? This is less than 50 operators. What, top to bottom, probably. I mean, there was like there was like 10 or 15 inside that do all the mapping of characters to pixels. Your camera, processing area was maybe like 5 or 10 tops. So I think it's a really great example. And for folks, you could go your whole career in Touch Designer making amazing art, extremely complex projects, and really just have basic GLSL skills. And if you want proof, you just this guy on the left side, like I can teach GLSL 101s and 201s, but people don't call me if they want something like what Vincent Houzé would make or what Noah Norman would make. Those folks. When you see something that Keith would put together with fractals or like kind of these beautiful content pieces that those guys put out. They're really shader experts. And I'm more like probably a lot of the viewers at home, which is, if it's 10, 20 lines of GLSL, I'm like, yeah, I could do this. I could make a little tool for myself to do that, but I'm not going in and doing like my own fluid sims in a shader from scratch. So I think that's a cool thing, and I think it's like a really relatable thing as well. Now, I want to save time because, one of the tricky things today, folks, is we do have to end on time at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we still have 2 other challenges to go through. And before we wrap up talking about this challenge, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the preparation that you put in for the championship and kind of like preparing yourself. What did that look like for you when it came to something like this? Was it that you were just getting comfortable manipulating data? Were you giving yourself kind of practice challenges? How did that preparation look like for you?
Well, at first, it was trying all sorts of things to see what sticks, basically, and what looks interesting enough, I guess. And I wasted a lot of time in trying different sensors and, tried making the Telegram bot, some Arduino stuff. But I found that, this in its simplicity was my best bet, I guess. I don't think this was a challenge that went best for me, let's say. I think it was my most impressive bid. But I think that if this was to be a real installation, it would be really cool, So that's why
it would be a lot of fun for sure. Yeah, people, especially I really like that you got the Twitch chat on like the left, and then you got the like content on the middle. Like that's a fun, kind of using the same technique for 2 very different things. And this would be an amazing kind of like, I don't know if it wouldn't work on a flip dot display, but I've seen a couple of those kind of old school Subway.
It'd be hard with a flip dot, but perhaps you could make it too slow and it would work. I don't know. All right.
The other question I had for this one was, how did you prepare yourself from a time limit perspective? Because, you literally built most of this in 90 minutes. And from a tool perspective, it looks like the reflections was something you brought into the project. Mm-hmm. But the rest of it then you basically made from scratch. What was that thought process in your head from a planning perspective? Especially on the day of, it's like, okay, timer starts now. Did you have a plan for how you wanted to do it? Was it kind of just more stream of thought? How did you approach the time? Because I think that time limit, and obviously the championship is like a event that's outside of the real world in a lot of capacity. But, we do a lot of thinking about how do we make this like a fair thing that is representative of what real touch designer development is like in the real world. And I think we, now that you've been in the field and especially working with, like big companies like telecoms and stuff like that, those are big projects where someone's like, oh yeah, client wants something in 7 hours and it's very hard. So, see you in 7 hours and it better be done kind of situation. And that I think is really reflective of kind of like this kind of process. So how was it for you from a planning perspective and a time crunch perspective?
Well, absolutely. What you said, these projects that we've been working on in the past year or so have been a really good stress acclimatization, exercise. So, working late nights and on hard deadlines, it made the championship look easier, I guess, in a way. So I could be more focused than normally. So starting with the scene was an easy bet, I guess. So I tried to build the scene first and make things
like
as
building that
procedural as
environment.
possible. Yeah. So every wall, like it's referenced on another wall. So this thing should scale up or down easily. And so if I don't like something, I can change one dimension and the rest will follow. Mm-hmm. Because basically it doesn't add any time in prep, but it makes things when you want to adjust things, it makes it much easier and much faster.
So you did actually take the time in that build to actually, like you're saying, you parameterize certain elements of it. Oh, that's interesting.
If you see here, for example, it's They all have references, and some have select shops inside and things like that. So just the basics, but
just enough, like you were saying, if you needed to tweak the size of it or the look of it a little bit, you have some control without having to just like dive back into the programming.
But at the end of the day, after 15 or 20 minutes, I knew that I had something looking nice going. So then it was a matter of adding the advanced, let's say, under quotes, bits. So, but even if one of these shader processes, didn't work, I had the other one. So I had fallback the matrices, let's say, to use. In the end, it worked, because if you start with the easy tasks and gradually ramp up, it gives you confidence, and after a while you lose any insecurity you might have under stress. So it worked fine in the end. I didn't have any issues with any of the challenges other than the particles on the final scene, which we'll see later. So yeah, that was my process pretty much, and by all means, I had practiced a lot before, so all these things I had made before multiple times, and I had multiple solutions for different things.
And I think that's a really interesting thing that you're mentioning, which is the idea that there is a bit of like a confidence game and a little bit of like a mental game that you go through in development. And I think it's really interesting that you brought that up, because I think it is a really perfect representation of also how the real world works, right? Like when the client comes to you and says, I need something really hard in 7 hours, or like 8, or by tomorrow morning I need to see all this stuff done. Even for someone like me, this is still something that, like, even when you get to like a really advanced stage of your career and like you've been doing this for a really long time, there's still that stress can push up against your confidence level. And I think if you don't have some strategies for, whether it's like, for me, like mindfulness meditation is like a really big thing. And I didn't want to get into a whole self-care thing. I love talking about self-care and money, but mindfulness meditation is like a huge thing for me. Really helps me just kind of focus, be present, not get overwhelmed by those kind of time constraints, deadline constraints, amount of work like on my shoulders constraints. And I think that strategy that you mentioned is also like a really good one, where starting from the things you can easily, like, this part's easy, let me get into it. And I also think there's another part of it that I've noticed about myself, and I don't know if this is a shared experience, but once I grease the wheel a little bit, it turns way better. And I don't know if this is because, like, for me personally, like, between HQ, personal life and all this other stuff, like my mind bounces around a lot between non-development tasks, that when I come to development, I actually find like my brain is not in the place to even tackle like something hard. And I think you're exactly on the point there. Like, one of the things that really helps, for me, it's a little less about the confidence and a little bit more about the, getting the neurons firing the right pathways, because, probably for the last 2 hours I was on phone calls, and the hour before that I was answering emails, and the 2 hours before that I was doing something else that's also not programming. And I think that's a great strategy for folks to kind of keep in their back pocket when you're tackling something hard. Start with the easy part of it a little bit, get the warmth in your body going, get the neurons firing, they're on their pathways, getting them lighting up, to your point, giving yourself that confidence of like, oh yeah, look, I'm getting stuff done, like this is going to be like a, we just keep chipping away and it's going to be done soon enough. So I think that's like a really cool kind of piece of advice and tip that you got there.
Absolutely.
So
shall we move on to the next one then?
I think so, yeah. So now I'm also going to mention, there's a couple questions in the chat. Recordings will be available, folks. If you joined late, don't worry about it. Right after this, you can watch it both on YouTube and Twitch, the recording of it. The only thing to remember is that Twitch only keeps them for 60 days or 90 days or something like that. I don't have control over it. YouTube keeps them forever. Thank you to our Google overlords for keeping data forever by default. But that's so. If you do want to watch the recording, it'll be available like immediately afterwards. Okay, so do you need me to hide your screen while you're switching projects? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay, give me a second here. So we are back side by side. So now you can go ahead and prepare on the backside. And while you're doing that, I will say, folks, if you have any questions about what you're seeing on screen, about any things that, we're talking about in Aristotle's projects, or if we're talking about workflow stuff and kind of professional career stuff, by all, I just realized, am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Oh my God. OBS terrifies me sometimes because I look down and I see like most of the channels and the audio muted. I'm like, oh my God, I've been muted for so long.
That'll be fun.
That's what happens when you don't like stream like very consistently. Feel free to ask your question. The moral of the story is, we got chat open. We're watching here. We're having a nice conversation. We'd love to have you guys involved in asking questions. Okay, so now the second challenge here. So this was the integration challenge. And for folks that missed the championship, this was the challenge where really the only restriction was trying to integrate Touch Designer with another type of real-time application, whether that was something like Notch, Unreal, Processing Ableton, like as long as something else real-time was kind of running alongside of it, that was the challenge criteria. Now, before we dive into that, Anamika had a question, which was, how were these projects pre-planned before the contest? Did you really know the final end result that you were going to build, or was it more that you had a toolkit of techniques that you wanted to use, and what the final thing ended up being was kind of more in the moment?
The contrary to last year where we didn't have any clue, this one we had a general direction what the challenge would be, let's say.
Yeah, and I can clarify for people that maybe didn't watch last year's championship either. So last year the challenges were completely secret to the competitors. So if you thought the time limit alone was stressful, imagine not even knowing what you have to make. And we told everybody like at the top of the hour, okay, here's all the rules for the challenge. You have to do all of these things. See you in 60 minutes. And this year we took a little bit of a different approach where we told all the competitors, what the challenges are ahead of time. Really there was no extra specifics that would restrict them from, presenting the best of their abilities. So when Aristotle was saying, everyone had kind of ahead of time information about like what these challenges would be, that's what we're referring to.
Yeah, but I had a few ideas in my mind, let's say, and I decided which one to go with. But so it's not like I had one project in mind, but I had a few, and I just went for them, let's say.
Great. Do you want me to bring up your screen again?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Now let's go over to that. Oh, this one was sick, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
This one is definitely Notch, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool. So I think before diving into the technical side of this one, maybe, I just want to kind of leave it on screen for a moment so people can like see it from different, like, do you want to even just talk about what it's doing overall at like a high level?
Absolutely. By the way, this is not my design. I took reference for someone else's work. I'm trying to remember now. Find it again, I guess, and post it on the comments. But yeah, so yeah, I found it hugely inspiring and wanted to create something in that sense. So what we're seeing is LED bars, basically, let's say, within an elongated room. They're all instances, cloner instances in Notch. So each part has a tube, a disk that holds the tube in place, and a column and a base. So it's the tubes are using an emissive material, which, along with voxel cone lighting in Notch, they can create real-time emissive materials, let's say.
Yeah, that's great.
You're not getting the best results out there, but it's good enough, and it gives you reflections as well. And this is exported as a Notch block, which we have right here, with a few exposed parameters. So we have an area light at the back, which we can adjust. this was done in real time as well, but with notch being notch, this was very easy to set up. So this scene like took me like 10 minutes to set up.
Yeah.
And the magic happens in touch where all the positions of the tubes get calculated, etc.
Yeah, so how is that, from the notch setup side of things, are you expecting that you're passing in a rotation value only, or is there, is there more data that you need for that actual control of those lights?
As a minimum, it needs these 9 values. So
sorry, it needs the full, transformation matrix. But are you controlling anything other than the rotation? Like, did you set it up in a way where Notch is only expecting, hey, just give me, the 10 RX values. I'm going to use those to spin it, or is there kind of more processing happening on the Notch side?
No, it's basically that, but. The way I set it up in Notch is that it was location agnostic, let's say. So because I didn't have time to place things correctly.
So actually, even the cloners, like exactly. The row of them comes from Touch Designer side of things as well.
Yeah, because every time you have to make a change in Notch and export the block again, it takes time, and you could do it in real time, but there's a very high chance of the software crashing. So I didn't want to risk that, and I said, that I'll just place them from within Touch as if they were instances. So
yeah, and that's kind of like the really interesting part, I think, is seeing where people draw that line of, how much of it actually is statically set up in Notch and how much of it is, more like procedural. So I think that's really interesting, because I would have guessed from my just like looking at it that, on the Notch side of things, we actually set up the whole, row or column of lights and everything was in position. And then in Touch, all it was like sending some rotation values. But it's really interesting that you were, for your, under the time constraint and things like that, which I think is a very smart idea, is let me make as much of this on the Touch Designer side of things to set up in case, like we were saying in the previous example, in case I need to tweak things, then I don't need to like go back into Notch, re-export the block, re-import the block, start to remapping parameters. So I think that's a really smart idea to kind of bring a lot of it over to Touch Designer side of things.
Absolutely, thank you. So yeah, once you have that set up, so we have this base transforms here where you have a line that gives us these points, in the area, and then. And
that's literally just that's a line SOP. You grabbed a line SOP, and then you grab the points out of the SOP to chop.
Yes, and you can see that I didn't like my initial adjustments, so I use the transform chop, transform shop to move it.
Interesting. So that sets up all of the kind of structural elements of that scene. I'm curious how you managed to create that signal for, like, okay, well, half of them go this way now, half of them go that way, or everyone kind of in a wave. Like, how did you build out those kind of data points? Wait, that's not it. Is that the whole thing right there? Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
See, this is one of those things I'm like, oh man, is this going to be like a 20, 50? No, this looks complicated. And then you pan over a little bit and it's like a bunch of patterns and wave chops or something.
Well, there are better ways to go about it. If I had all the time in the world, I would do it in a different way. But this was good enough to make in such a short time. So basically, I have these different patterns, and I switch between them with simple switch. So no cross or whatever, but I have a filter afterwards, so this get forced to blend, let's say.
Oh man, that's really smart. Wow. So literally you just have, I guess your first one is your flat position.
Yeah.
The second ramp looks like that's the one where it does a spiral. Is that
exactly? Yes.
I'm trying to imagine. This is the tricky thing with these. You have to imagine the result of the channel. And then I guess the third one, so that's a straight line. Actually, I want to, okay, so then now we're going into that fourth one. interestingly,
I
which
can
does
force
the...
it to be a specific one if you want. So
Oh, interesting. So that's
which one?
the... Yeah, let's
That's
see
the
what the
cross.
sine wave... How does the sine wave look like?
Sine wave is the second one, I believe. Yeah. Actually, the third one, but the number 2. Yeah. Give it a second. For some reason, OBS is messing up my FPS.
Oh, I mean, that's pretty... Yeah,
No,
that's pretty normal. Yeah.
no, that's the cross. So
Can you zoom into that pattern at the end? The crosses pattern?
yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Look at that. So it's basically just like a repeating ramp.
Yeah.
And then each sample basically ends up going
Yeah, pretty much.
like all the way down the line. That's very cool.
So
That's so clever. I love that. And that, I mean, that's one of the most fun things about using Touch Designer with notches. You know, you get this kind of really simple like signal creation in Touch, and then you instance and set up all your cloners in Notch, and like, you know, bada boom, bada bing. Finish up your workday early. You know what I'm saying? And get yourself a little iced tea.
How simple this setup is, and you know, people don't realize that it's not a long way between this and creating the actual hardware setup. You know, so when you see these things and you are, wow, my God, you know, how these people do it. You know, it's this basically, and a bunch of Arduinos and motors. So it's
because I guess you could really,
leap, but not a huge one.
You could take the same signal like after the filter. You know, maybe you might have to shuffle it a little bit depending on, you know, what it's going out to. But, you know, if you imagine it's just going out to some DMX or even just, you know, Arduino type of setup, it's probably just wanting, you know, those same rotation values. You give it to it, and then the hardware in real life copies, which is very cool. Now, we do have a question. Actually, we have a question and a comment. So one question is, what would the final render output be? Video loop, or would it be able to be interactive by the user? And I guess the answer would be, it's because even, I mean, everything is real time in this one. There's nothing baked about it. Yeah, because even like lower there, that's where you're doing all the turning on and off the different individual bars of lights. And then the real time positions is a little bit above it, and, you know, going into Notch and setting up the cloner setup. So yeah, so this is fully real time. Could be, you know, interactive with a few more nodes, and to your point, like, you could even control a physical version of this with a few more nodes on the end.
Absolutely.
And then we have a nice comment from iBeef Alone, who's saying the flexibility of all these real-time tools really underline the artistry of system design. It just depends on what you want to achieve. I agree. So yeah, let's take a look at this color area too, because I think it's using a similar technique, and it's very effective. Like, that is a it's oddly so simple, yet I'm looking on the right side, I'm like, wow, it looks really good. Like, and I look on the left side, like, there's 3 nodes, and I'm like, well, the right side looks really good. So I guess, like,
it's very basic, true.
And is it basically like, so you have I see a constant top, a ramp animating, and then a non-animating ramp?
Yeah. This gets used whenever we have the cross pattern. So when we have the cross pattern, you just see black, white, black, white, black, white. It's pretty much that.
Oh, interesting. So those spacing in the, like, the period that you set of that texture perfectly aligns to basically turn on and off every other
exactly
bar, LED bar. And then are you crossing between that? Is that what's going on, or is it like a switch or something?
Yeah, it's a switch. It's a blended switch, I think, this one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then that just feeds in as a texture into Notch that you're sampling?
Yes.
Damn, that's a nice. I mean, this is a
planar mapping.
Do you happen to have the Notch project open that we can look at?
Yeah, I can open it really.
Do you want me to switch over to take off your screen while you open that?
No, it should be fine. I'll leave this open. It just may take a while because.
Yeah, that's no problem. And while we're opening that, maybe we can talk about the other side of things, because I think this is a really great example of, like, you know, simple tricks to generate a very effective output. which let's face it, when we're talking about doing projects and everyone wants to make art, no one wants to. If you could get the same result in a faster period of time, usually that's better. And yeah, I see Scotty in the chat saying Elbers wants in. Okay, I want in. Listen, folks, this is a complete tangent, but and Aristotle's you're gonna agree, but I don't know if you're gonna have any additionals because I think you already agree with this. But folks, you got to take care of yourselves. Self-care is important. One of the things I do is I use Fridays as my treat myself day, and I allow myself to. I get I get the largest iced tea from Starbucks that I can, and I also have a hot Starbucks. This is I'm flying on cloud 9 right now. I'm just like. You got the caffeine on this side and the cold, I don't even know what, look at the color. You can't even tell what fruit this is by the color, but that's okay because it is tasty. So, give yourself a little treat once in a while. Don't always be a dictator of yourself. Take care of yourself. Anyways, I digress. We got the Notch project open.
Yeah. So at the moment you don't say anything because remember these are
these get placed by the touch design side of things.
So at the moment they are all in 0.0. I think I had created a simple cloner setup. Yeah, so I could see what's happening.
Oh, interesting. So you use this more of on the design when you were kind of laying it out and thinking about it. Interesting.
But none of the positions get fed by it. So just something to test it. This is all under a render layer, so I can have an individual glow on the tubes.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you actually have things split out into separate layers.
Yes, well, the Notch has this very useful node, which is a render layer. So any post effects you add on it, they only are used in this area, let's say. So.
And I think for folks that are maybe not as comfortable with Notch, I always equate this kind of to throwing down a render pass top. The only difference is in Touch where we have the render pass top and then we have to recomposite it back in, basically having the render pass go back to the root node, recomposites that render pass for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's actually really smart. So then you're only applying things like the glow. So that's giving the lights a nice glow on their own layer, but not kind of really affecting the rest of the scene.
Yes. Because remember, this is real time. It's emissive, but it's not really emissive. So you have to trick it as much as possible. And going back to the geometry setup, as we said on the touch side of things, I had done the same thing here. So we have these 3 envelopes, which feed the scales of the walls, and just changing the width, depth, or the height of the room changes the whole room basically accordingly. So
can you change it now?
Let's see. I
want to see what happens. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
If I was smart enough, I would have used this to affect the bounding box of the voxel cone lighting, because now if I make it too wide, you see that the voxel cone breaks at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Hey, it works. That's it works. It's good enough. There it is. And I love this very clean network too. I love that. And I think Crystal was also saying that in the chat. Very, very clean Notch network. Which is surprisingly hard for people that don't use Notch as much. The way the inputs and outputs work is a little bit tricky to keep things clean a lot of the time.
Yeah, I love Notch, but the thing that I'm really missing is the different levels we have in Touch Designer with components. And
being able to clean stuff up really helps the mental workflow side of things.
I had this other project where I had 2,500 nodes on one level, and it was a pain to navigate. So
that's
it's.
So how many nodes is this one? Just for people's reference, this is 47. So this times 100 is what, 5,000? So this times 50.
it was like you could see
Yeah.
you needed to see it from this far to see the whole of it.
If anyone wanted proof that you could be successful without knowing math in the business, just look at the math I tried to do out loud, and then just feel like, okay, cool. If that's how he talks, like we can make it too. Like that's. I hope that's comforting for folks that me doing that out loud was like, okay, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Let me tell you, it wasn't fun though.
Yeah, I can imagine 2,500 nodes is a bit of a situation. So we do have a good question. Actually, no, go ahead. Yeah, finish your point, then we can get to that question.
Yeah, a fun fact, or not so fun actually, was that just rendering those nodes on the viewport, the node graph, was very taxing to the system. And, I should have realized that before, but, there was nothing I could do. I had this complicated setup where I was turning cooking off for most of them when they were not used. But still, just the fact that they were on the node graph was taxing to the system. So, I think that's something that should really be added in the next revision or so.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, I think, especially because probably, I'm not going to guess a lot of the types of work folks are doing out there, but I think over time, Notch is really getting pushed. And I'll come out and say, like, I think our community, the touch designer community, are the type of mad scientists, like that you're saying, we will put 2,500 nodes on a single network, and then that'll reveal the issues of like, oh, well, we should like add these things to help those kind of people. And I feel like the installation business will probably help with more complexity, because I find a lot of time for tours, music, shows, the way people build those notch blocks is more of like, here's an effect in one notch block, here's an effect in another notch block, here's a piece of content in this other notch block. And I feel like from the touch designer side of things, like we come at it from, here's like the 10 problems I need to solve with this notch block, and I need it all inside of one block that I get control from touch designer, because that's the optimal way for me to manage my resources. So I'm hopeful too that over time, like these things will kind of get ironed out. So here's the question we had from Scotty in the chat was, in terms of workflow, how much time do you spend planning before you put any operators together? And how do you envision your project and allocate your time accordingly? Or do you just dive in?
So I would ask you
both. Yeah, I would say both. Both on the championship side of things and like even on your general side of things. And then I can answer from my like general side of things too.
Yeah. Actually, one of the first things I learned after joining the HQ and watching the optimization workshop, what's the name? I don't remember,
I think it's called touch designer optimization. There's no fancy marketing name for that one. It's just touch designer optimization.
Yeah. Just creating the general architecture and the base components, putting the base components in place of all the tools you're going to need. Like, here's where my scripts go, here's where my rendering goes, here's where the output goes. And then just, going level by level inside, it creates a higher level understanding of how I'm going to approach this problem, basically. And I think that's, and then starting to create custom parameters. If you don't have custom parameters on a big project in Touch Designer, if you don't have custom parameters in place, it's very quickly getting very dark, inside. So
yeah, accurate way of describing it. It gets dark real quick.
So as soon as you have everything useful set up in custom parameters, you can try multiple things. You can, whenever your clients need something, and recently, like we had a funny request where during a playback mode of a scene, the client needed a progress bar to count, the progress of the video or sorts. But they also wanted to count all sorts of other stuff. So by having everything in custom parameters, I just had to add the custom parameters in place and create something that would take me forever to figure out otherwise, in an hour or so. So I can't stress it enough.
And was that similar for the championship approach as well? Or was your championship approach more like, we got to go faster than that?
I didn't have that time to do custom parameters in the championship, and I also didn't think it would be useful in terms of you judging it. because I'd like, for the judging process to have everything under one level, so
so yeah, so we can see everything. Actually, that's good thinking. Yeah. I could say from my side, like what I've experienced is kind of similar to what you're saying, and actually, so you were talking about the project architecture for pros workshop that we have, which I don't want to say is my magnum opus by any stretch, but it's a good one. I think that's a good one, and that process that Aristotle was talking about is kind of something I do even to this day, which is, if a project comes in and the client tells me the brief of here's all the things that have to happen. Part of my planning is putting operators, but just empty containers and base comps. So I'll open up a project, save it in the project folder, and I'll start going through and say, okay, well, client said, we got to have a heartbeat that talks to this system. Okay, make a component, call it heartbeat. We also have to do some scripts that are going to deal with this. Make a component, call it scripts. Oh, actually, they want like 6 kinds of transitions. Okay, well, that's going to be a separate area of the network. I want to make a transition component. Inside of it, I'm going to put 6 kind of other components for each one of the transitions. And I start to go through this, and it's almost like, for me, it feels a lot like mind mapping, but like touch designer centric for touch designer work. And I could end up with a project that is completely empty, but more or less fleshed out in terms of the architecture of like, here's where all my things go. Now, I don't go as far as the custom parameters, although I think that's a really good idea to start even from the beginning to lay out some of the interfacing between how some of these areas of the network are going to talk to each other. And then I think it goes back to similar to what we were saying earlier, which is I try and pick some easy victories that I can like start, if, heartbeat, okay, well, I got another one of those in another project. Let me go over, copy and paste that. Oh, the transitions are going to be easy. They're wipes. Let me just quickly build out, the wipes. And I just keep going from there, just increasing the difficulty of the things I'm tackling. And then when I'm feeling like, now I can go tackle like the main hard part of this project, like I'll go deal with that. And I find that kind of workflow of having these components helps me from the planning side. It also helps me from a like separation of features side of things. So that thing, and I have a very strict rule about nothing from one area of the network can reach in and touch anything in another area of the network. If, something in the heartbeat area needs to, let's say, for example, if something in the transition area needs to talk to the heartbeat area, there's no script inside the transition area that's ever allowed to just go straight inside of the heartbeat area and like touch stuff. The only way that works is it can only touch the custom parameters. The custom parameters deal with what's inside of that. Now, obviously, I get into too much details, but I think that's for me my kind of planning. Kind of in a nutshell, like and even before that, I would say like the pre-production planning, I really like bullet point lists of here's all the stuff that have to happen, and that's more from a business side because I can share that with the client and be like, did I miss anything? Like, is this what I'm getting paid for? And once they say yes, then I kind of dive in immediately to that. But yeah, then after that, I think after that I dive right in. It's the same for you, right? Like after you kind of have the skeleton set up. You just dive Absolutely. In and start building stuff, right? Whatever you're most excited about, whatever you feel might be easy, victories, all that kind of stuff. So we have another Tavia saying, I do very similar workflow. Sketching out the modules is nice because the experience afterward kind of feels like going through a list and checking each item. I think so. It's a really kind of almost cathartic experience. Like you get the skeleton set up and you're like, oh, I have the whole thing like sketched out kind of in a way. Cool. So, thanks for that question. Let us, I guess we should, to the third thing, right? Okay, well, hold on. So, okay, wait, before we dive in, so here's quick. So now this is, in the timeline, we got to the end of day 1. You got into the finals day. How did that feel for you? Like just, because especially since I believe last year you got the Notch prize from Notch because of like some really nice ways you were using Notch in the projects, but you didn't end up ranking last year. So how did it feel like, from last year not ranking and then this year like you're like, oh man, like I'm going to the finals this time. Not that we had a finals, you know what the question is though. Yeah. I'm too hopped. I'm Elber's Starbucks hands over here. Like, I'm a little razzed up. So
Well, it was a roller coaster ride in many ways. So at first I felt really confident. Then I saw what other people were making in the beginning, and I was like, well, shit, I'm lost here. There's no way I'm getting the finals. And the level was really high, and I really admired what other people were doing. But at the same time, I had practiced really hard, and if I weren't getting into the finals, I would be really sad. So I both didn't believe it. I was gonna do it, and at the same time, I would be sad about it. So just seeing my name on the top 3, let's say, was great relief. Equal to winning the thing, actually. I'd say.
That's awesome. Well, now this is now going into the final day, and there was only one challenge on that day where everyone had to kind of like, get as many points as they can to try and rank. And this one I think was a really cool one. Now, do you have that YouTube video open by chance?
Yeah, give me a second.
Sure. So this was a very cool project. It's basically like there's particles and fluid simulations, and then some like, I guess, was it Brandon Fraser was the first mummy, right? And remember the Mummy, the original Mummy movie, not the Tom Cruise ones. Like, was it Brandon Fraser? Somebody in the chat, who was the original person in the Mummy? Also, I'll tell you who the original person in the Mummy was. That mustache guy up there. That's the original Mummy himself. But it did that thing where like the face came out of the sand kind of situation. So we have the YouTube video here just because the face tracking isn't working on Aristotle's system right now. We wanted to show you what it kind of looked like in the championship as that face kind of came through the simulation. I don't know, that mustache looks good. I might go back to the mustache. Anyways, I digress. So the face was coming out of the fluid sim, which was super cool. I mean, you could see all of us judges like, this is crazy. Like we weren't expecting that to happen. Like that's super sick. Now, let's hop back to the project, because then we can look at like kind of how it was built, how it was put together. I guess our first question, was it Kinect?
No.
No, it was not Kinect.
Yeah, it was NVIDIA face mesh.
It was NVIDIA face mesh.
Track, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and I think for folks that if you haven't tried this yet, we have a couple of really nice YouTube videos that really just help get you started with, because you have to go through like a little bit of like command line process to get the tracking system set up with, and you got to like output some weird file in the NVIDIA's format and then connect that to a bunch of operators. So if you haven't done that, just check our YouTube channel. We got some good ones up there. We even have the Thug Life. We took it all the way to Thug Life classes. That was a lot of fun. I had fun with that one. So no Kinect for this one. So what you were using was the mesh that gets generated from the NVIDIA face tracking thing, and using that actual geometry to interact with the rest of the scene.
And apologies that people can get to see that. I formatted my computer recently, and I think some of the config files got messed up. But we can walk through the process together. So this is where the camera feed was getting in, and throwing it into this face track job here. It was giving us tracking points for various points of the face, basically.
Yeah, it basically tells you like, here's the bounding box of the face as it relates to the image, and then you can put up landmarks. Here's where the eyes are. Here's where the mouth is. So that's all like the channel data.
Yes, and it's much less noisy than a Kinect, I've found. So you then feed that into a face track shop, which uses an underlying mesh, and that gets transformed based on those points.
And actually, if you turn on the viewer, does it show the mesh there, just static? Or is it like invisible?
No, it doesn't. No.
Oh, that's annoying. So if you can imagine, if folks have seen a lot of these AR demos where there's like a mesh, like generic face mesh, that then gets like the mouth moves and the eyes blink and stuff based on all of the tracking data, that's kind of what to imagine here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
sprinkle.
I could threw some points on top of it.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, and I merged it with the original points. But before we go further, let me fix it so people can look at the actual thing. I think that's the culprit right here. So yeah, if I and we'll go over the process later, so folks don't get discouraged if you don't understand what's happening.
I'm like, what's happening here?
Yeah. All right. So you direct the conversation. How do you want to start? And
Okay, so there's a couple folks saying sprinkle sop is cool, and some folks saying that they haven't used sprinkle sop before. It's a very cool operator. All it does is if you give it a geometry, like let's say you have like the outline of a banana in the geometry, and what you wanted was to just randomly distribute points on the face of it. That's what sprinkle sop lets you do, like really easily. Basically, just take this mesh that may just be an outline with no kind of density or information in the middle, and just kind of put points all over that face of it. Yeah. So I think maybe the first place is maybe start with the flex simulation first, because that's kind of like what everything sits on.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe talking about the flex simulation and maybe the environment, because this is another Touch Designer environment.
How do you mean in terms of
like
rendering?
the room is this like another notch block, or is this a Touch Designer side of rendering?
No, it's Touch Designer.
And so this probably has similar to the first kind of one that you did, so we don't have to go too deep into it.
Exactly. It follows the same paradigm other than the particle simulation happening.
Yeah, great.
Just a different material. This one is a PBR instead of a Fong. So you can see a bit of a nicer texture.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the flex simulation, we have firstly the boundary area, which is this over here, and so I was using this to cut it out of the wall, the original wall. So if I turn this off, you should see the wall. So this is a perfect match because I'm taking that geometry, which gets basically just transformed out of this one.
And that feels really like that, that effect that we see a lot in like, Rafik Anadol's work, where it kind of feels like the volume exists as a part of that room. So that's like a really smart way to do it. Use the same bounding volume for your simulation to actually cut like out that hole of the wall.
Exactly, and I'm not only using it as boundaries. I'm using it as an area, as a volume actually to sprinkle points on. So, but in this case, instead of surface per primitive bounding box, I'm using volume. So this sprinkles the points on all the volume.
And for folks, this sprinkle sop, I'm telling you, is super cool. So you can do the one that we just said, and actually Scotty in the chat was mentioning using the trace sop is a really good companion with sprinkle, because then you can have a 2D texture. Trace sop turns it into a geometry that is just the trace, and then the sprinkle sop basically like spreads points all over it to give you like a really full dense mesh. So you can also do what Aristotle is saying here, which is not only just sprinkle on the mesh, but if you give it like a box or a sphere, you can say, you know what, just distribute points inside of this volume just randomly everywhere.
Absolutely. And and then we have the sphere as an actor. It's just a basic sphere that moves back and forth. So up to this point, it's a sort of simple setup.
And for folks that don't know what NVIDIA Flex is, it's basically fluid simulation but particle based. So this is basically very similar, where if you think about like something like NVIDIA Flow, which is more about fluid and smoke and those kind of simulations on a 2D side of things, this is kind of the 3D. I mean, I guess Flow is kind of 3D in some way, but this is really like the 3D fluid simulation where all of the particles are representing, those fluids moving around.
Yep.
So I think that kind of covers that side of the So you have this simulation. You got a box where all the points are inside of that simulation. You got the sphere moving around, interacting with things. How does because I know there's a couple of interesting things you're doing here. One of them is the color manipulation of the actual particles. Maybe that's the next interesting place to jump into.
Yeah, for me, it was really hard to texture them properly. So that took a while to figure out how to texture particles that are moving, depending on their movement as well. So the way I found out that worked for me was to create sort of a feedback loop. So I'm getting the texture coordinate, the particle coordinates here with an NVIDIA Flex top. So basically, for people who don't know, this is a UV map. So you could turn this into points. And I don't know why this is not showing properly. But anyhow,
it's data. It's data, yeah. I think you have to hit V is the hotkey.
Yeah. All right.
There it is.
So yeah, every pixel in essence has RGB values, and they represent a position in UV space. So let me remember what I did here. I did some different math operations.
Looks like some ranging and scaling.
Yeah, to scale them in the X and the Y, I think. Yeah.
So a lot of it's based on kind of pulling that, because I think for a lot of people they see this and they just don't even know how to approach it, and they're like, how do they do that with a Phong material? But actually, this is based on pulling that data out of the simulation. You rearranging it, using it for lookups, using that kind of XY position, or actually, and another thing I've seen a lot of people do is use like the velocity, because you can also get from the NVIDIA Flex top things like the velocity of all the pixels. Velocity of all the points as pixels, and use that for things like lookups and coloring.
If you don't do that and you just texture them, with a camera mapping, you would see the same color constantly. So like, it wouldn't be per sphere. It would be like a gradient on top of it. So I wouldn't get the same result. And when I found how to do it per sphere, the moment the simulation started, it get blended. So like because one point started in the center and it ended up all over the place. So it kept its original color. So I had to find a way to get its position and to feed that back into the texture. And people with who are proficient in GLSL texturing, they might be able to do it in a better way. Or just with my mediocre GLSL skills, I couldn't come up to that.
I prefer to call them utilitarian GLSL skills. That makes me feel it's not artistic; it's utilitarian. If I need to clip a point cloud, utilitarian. I like it. Yeah.
But they're not at the, let's say, championship level.
That's okay. Yeah.
They wouldn't win me the championship. So yeah, then these get here basically. Here we have a depth map.
That's very cool.
And so we know the position in the Z space of the particles. Then I'm creating a ramp to color this area blue.
So basically, if it's a really low value because it's coming towards the camera, is that when you color them blue?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Then I add some noise to make it a bit more organic, as a friend of yours likes to say. Here I'm using it with a threshold top. I create another map basically, which creates the white bit.
Like the really bright highlight.
Yeah, it's three composites in essence. It's really bright. On the really bright, I'm also using glow. We have the underlying blue, and then the base particles. So, does it make sense this far? I don't know.
Yeah, perfectly. I think what I would say is, so since we do, folks have to end in exactly 15 minutes. I think looking at the how then you brought the mesh from the face into the mix would be really cool. And then we have a couple questions that we can kind of wrap up with.
Absolutely. So the face, this is where you end up with a soap, like as if it was
that little
a
like mask,
void mask, some sort.
Yeah.
And then we sprinkled the points on top of it. It was very important to do it per primitive instead of the surface, because surface was giving me noisy results when the mask was moving, when my head was moving. So the only way to keep them solid was to do per primitive. So I create these points and I merge them with the original points, basically.
Interesting. So so it's not just that there's a face, but the face is actually like coming in and out of a plane.
Exactly. It's basically a different simulation altogether, and I just switch between them.
Interesting. So is there physically a second Flex solver, or more just like you're just switching the data feed behind the scenes?
Exactly. I'm switching the data that gets fed into it.
Oh, interesting. So all the things that we just saw with the circle, with that sphere, just gets switched from using the sphere's data to using the face data.
Yes.
Interesting. I think that's a really smart way. That's, if I think about the future touch designer developers that, are going to replace us, I think that's going to be probably their greatest strength, is they're going to think about data very differently. Because we're still trying to retrain ourselves to not look at textures and see pictures. When we see like the noisy stuff, we're like, oh yeah, like okay, yeah, data. Don't forget data. But for them, that's normal. Like that's the difference between someone born and cell phones existing and someone born when cell phones didn't exist. I swear, I know it sounds crazy, but I think that level of difference is going to exist in our industry between people who existed when GPU processes weren't everything. And then there's going to be people who existed after that. After basically everybody who their first computer had RTX. There's going to be no contest. Yeah, exactly. Those folks who grow up with GPU processing first, it's going to be complete. When they're 20, I hope to be retired, because I don't want. I ain't compete with those kids. That's it for me. So this is really amazing. I mean, this project was so cool to see live. It really was kind of, and a lot of folks in the chat have been saying it's so innovative in how it's, using all of these different new techniques in a really kind of unified and kind of well structured and thought out way. It's just a really impressive piece overall.
Thank you.
So I think what we can do now is I'll take off the screen sharing, and we had a couple little questions that we're going to talk about here. Obviously, first of all, congratulations again on first place in the championship. I think that's an amazing achievement and feat. And I was gonna say, sure. So we told people there's a trophy. A lot of the time, sometimes by the time people get the trophy, it's really tired, so you never see the trophy. But we do make trophies for the winners.
My precious.
So that's amazing. Congratulations. I think for a lot of folks who are watching your career grow and kind of the work you're doing, yeah, Scotty's saying, wow, real reflections in those trophies. Yeah, it's not XR, that's real, that exists.
By the way, it's not small, I have massive hands, eh?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's not a small trophy. He has massive hands, that's for sure. He's actually an NBA player, is what he, Kawhi Leonard over here with the trophy in his hands. I hope one thing that people see from your experience and career, and especially championship this time, championship last time, and you've been on our live stream before, is if folks can really find their, I guess motivation's not the right word, discipline's not the right word. I think maybe commitment. I feel like from when you entered the touch designer space, you were immediately committed to growing your skills, being the best artist and developer you can, constantly learning, being involved in the community in a lot of different ways, and I think you're kind of reaping the benefits of that commitment. Because I know there's sometimes folks who come in and they put one foot in, but the other foot, whether it's because of work or personal commitment, they really can't go both feet in. And I think your experiences over this last like couple years, it really shows folks like, hey, listen, like if you do put both feet in, really commit yourself, even through like the most menial and boring things that you probably had to go through and experience, all those things do add up. And if you keep work hard, you can like really in a short amount of time jumpstart like a career to get that off the ground. So congratulations on that. Then I would say, so we got two final questions. One of them, do you have any fun plans for the licenses you won at the championship?
Fun plans? No.
Yeah, that's where Aristotle says not fun work. Yeah. And then everyone reconsiders whether they want to get in the industry or not. Yeah.
But I tend to have fun in other ways as well. So
yeah, that's true. That's healthy. That's good. But that's a very healthy tip.
They're much appreciated. Let me tell you that. It's a great prize in terms of monetary value, and it really helps a lot.
Great. I'm glad. I mean that's our hope is to hope to help the folks competing to continue their work, because it's not easy to pay for all these licenses all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. It adds up quite quickly, so it's a massive help. And thank you again, both you and Derivative and Notch and Matthew of Pseudo Magic, for their kindness and to give these awards out. It's massively.
Oh yeah, I mean we could go on a whole list of all the folks who helped out with the championship, and Walker and Azimuth Digital and Evan and everybody who were helping with the production, and Dom who was behind the scenes working on production. Like there's a lot of people involved. So thanks to everybody who was involved. So I think the last question to kind of leave you with, what are your future goals for your own practice as a developer and artist inside of Touch Design? Are there specific tools or techniques or art directions that are really kind of interesting you now that you're kind of moving towards?
For this year, my goal is to blend my two practices together again and to merge them into one. So up to this point, I had my artistic practice and my commercial practice, and I want them to become one. I don't want to create works that are lackluster for other people or to pose my artistic practice altogether. So I think it's time for me to have my own identity instead of just being a freelancer who covers needs, which is a great thing to do, but I think it's time for me to grow out of it. And with this new space we're building, I'm hoping that this will help me achieve that goal or get towards it, let's say.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a beautiful goal, beautiful direction. Good way to set your compass is to kind of merge, because I always laugh at it, because hold on, so for folks that don't know, we always joke that my background is basically just a printer and Aristotle's background is actually like a giant printer. So merging that into some Touch Design work, I think will be exciting to see if you can bring that or any of the other fun kind. I know you're working a lot with Arduinos and web stuff with cables and 3D printing, so it'll be really exciting to see kind of what comes of that. So the final thing I would say, I know I keep saying like the final thing for everything I say, but is there any kind of little tip or advice or kind of wisdom that you've gained from your journey over the last couple of years that you want to leave folks with?
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember is that if you like something enough, you should believe in yourself and do it. And I know this sounds like a naive thing to say, but when I started this journey and basically a change in careers, people were very negative on it. And
really,
I'm not that young to do such a thing.
Yeah.
And but I think people, if you believe you're going to be good at something, just do it and force yourself to try, and don't hit. It's only you who knows yourself in essence and what your limits are. So yeah, that's it. And we live in a great time where knowledge is out there. There's nothing that you want to learn that there's not the information. It's not out there. So if you believe you're going to learn something, you're going to learn something. It's simple as that.
I think it's wonderful advice. I would also add, if you have the patience to learn it, because that's what I find I'm running short on these days. Is when I was younger, the patience was like, I could sit there and like scratch the head for a couple hours, and now it's like if it doesn't work in 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my god, I have so many other things to do. So thank you so much for joining us, my friend. I would say if I had one quick piece of wisdom to leave for people, well, let me tell you, it's the HQ Pro. And I want some hearts in the chat for that transition. I know that transition was good. That was a good transition. And
that was a segue. Right?
That's what double handing, dual wielding Starbucks will really like do that to a man. But if you like a lot of stuff you're seeing here and you're interested in getting into Touch Designer and building that career and using the materials and getting support from professionals who have worked in this industry for over a decade, myself, Matthew Reagan, Noah Norman, along with a lot of our other teachers who most of the time I think are a lot smarter than me, to be honest. But I'll put a link in the chat. We do have a 7-day free trial. By all means, take advantage of it, check it out, see if it's the right fit for you. We think it is the right fit for a lot of people because we have over 100 hours of workshop materials now, with Touch Designer being a big focus, but especially a lot of integrations with Notch, Ableton, Unreal, and now we have a growing library of Unreal Engine materials. So we've got some new Unreal Engine virtual production courses and some new Unreal Engine kind of fundamentals if you've never gotten there before. And I love how I'm doing this at the same time that Rajat posted the emoji of me going like this. That's a very good timing, my friend. So feel free, check it out. We also have a private Facebook group where all our teachers are supporting all of our members every day, helping you remove the roadblocks from your practice and your career. And obviously tons of other features. But with that said, you are the best judge of whether it's worth it for you. So hop in the free trial and check it out. With that said, thank you, my friend, for joining us. It's our pleasure to have Aristotle Roufanis of Works of R here with us today, talking about how he picked up first place in the Interactive Immersive Championship. With that said, thank you all viewers for also joining us. It's a pleasure to always chat with you folks. And I know we missed last month's live stream. It was just a little bit busy on the personal side of things. And now we're going to be doing those more regularly. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you hit I don't even know. So if you're on the YouTube, what do they say? Hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for more awesome free content. That's the spiel that I had to do at the end of it. And then for Twitch, I think it's follow, hit the heart, the follow heart thing, and then all the good things will come to, and then, like one of those, I don't know if complete, this is the last story. Have you ever had one of those, this happens a lot when I'm like traveling. This happened once in Bangkok. It was the funniest thing. I know this is like completely unrelated, but people will find it funny. I was in Bangkok and I was walking down the street and this guy walks up to me and he's in like a nice suit. And I guess his whole shtick was that he was like a fortune teller. So he just starts telling me my fortune. Now, obviously by the end of it, like it has nothing to, he was doing one of those things where he was like reading me and like, guessing my birthday and like telling me I got like love life, like, like just the most generic, like fortune teller stuff, right? And then by the end, obviously he's like, well, I can make it better if you can give me a donation of basically all of the money in your wallet. I'm like, oh bro, come on. You had something going on. And then your sales pitch at the end was a little too strong. Like you gotta, if you want me, like, I'll take you out for a drink or something. We can like talk about my destiny, like fine. But like, anyways, I digress. I don't remember why that story came up, but it's a funny one. So with that said, folks, we will be back next month with another live stream and another amazing guest. So make sure you subscribe and follow. Yeah, as Scotty says, future not clear, please add funds. It was literally that. He's like, well, if you want your love life to get any better, I mean, you have to give me like 10,000 baht. And I'm like, what? 10,000 baht? Like I've never even spent that much money in my life before. Obviously like that's not a lot of money in Thailand, but I'm a very conservative spender, as you can see by my excitement of finally getting an RTX card. But I digress. Anyways, thank you so much, Aristotle, my friend. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.
Bye, everyone.